All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Gomberg from National Weather Service in Oxnard. So some of you have probably seen me in the past give the presentation. So I want to kind of give you an update on the fire weather perspective from our office, and then also talk about the debris flow incident from Montecito as well. So to review a few key personnel here from our office, myself, I'm the fire weather program manager of the office, and that first number is the key phone number that you want to jot down for your notes. That's a 24/7 telephone number that's just for you guys for the fire weather department. My boss is Mark Jackson, and the warning coordination meteorologist of the office who deals with a lot of the partners, including fire agencies, is Eric Bolt. And Rich Thompson, our incident meteorologist, so he actually is the one that goes out on fires during major events. And if you haven't been on our website, I encourage you to go on to weather.gov/Los Angeles. At the end, I'll give you a quick little tutorial on a couple key products to look at on there. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the rainfall summaries. How did we do this past winter season? How that's affecting the current state of the drought and the fuel conditions, as well as where's the outlook for through the summer months. I will review the products and services that we offer, including the difference between fire weather watch and red flag warning. And then also we're going to touch on debris flows and decision support products. So as far as the rainfall from the past season, October of last year to this month of April, this is a percent of normal. And you can see in the red here that most areas across our region, LA, Ventura County, are generally right around that 50–70% of normal. So we at least had some late season rain that did bring us up a little bit. And as a result, the drought situation, if you do a comparison from last year, April of 2017, April 2018, you can actually see the extreme drought has kind of pushed in a little bit into Ventura County there. But in general, pretty similar conditions in terms of the overall drought across Southern California. And then in terms of live fuel moisture, so I just grabbed the latest LA County live fuel. This one is focused over Santa Clarita Valley. And what you can see here is in the red line, that's the current 2018. So you can see a nice rise upward during the last couple months because of that late season rain. So we're actually in pretty good shape in terms of live fuel. You can see in the red area, we're actually touching right close to 120%. Blue is from last year, 2017, and the black is the average, so like a 30-year average. So we're almost approaching where we should be for this time of year. So a good spike upward in live fuel moistures, and that's for Santa Clarita Valley. And then if you look at the whole LA County and do a composite of all fuel types, we actually are right above normal for this time of year in the red line once again. So in pretty good shape for both LA, and I also looked at Ventura counties, and they're also in very similar conditions. So looking forward in terms of our weather outlook, these are the charts that are produced by the Climate Prediction Center in Washington, D.C. And these are focused on 3-month intervals. So the top, you can see April, May, and June right here. And what this is telling us is that over the next 3 months, the probability of rainfall is actually for below normal rainfall for all the Southwest. Okay? In terms of temperatures, we're actually projected to be warmer than normal, especially across Arizona and New Mexico, but also to a certain extent extending into Southern California. And then looking through the summer, July, August, September, what we kind of want to look for is out here in Arizona and New Mexico to see if there's any strong monsoonal probabilities, and right now they're not indicating that. So if anything, we're kind of right near normal in terms of rainfall, which is usually very minimal in the summer months. But more importantly is the temperatures. And again, focused out of the western states, continued above normal temperatures through the summer. And then in terms of the local outlook produced by the Predictive Services, I grabbed this from their latest issuance of April 1st. And you can see the composite here of May of 2018 versus June. And the main difference is you can see by May, they're actually putting Los Angeles County into that above normal for large fire potential, and then expanding that further west up into Santa Barbara County by June, and also extending it up through the Sierras. So the main things that they're highlighting, as you can see in the yellow, is the above normal temperatures expected, definitely a high grass crop concern, and a continuation of the long-term drought, the high dead field moisture content. So kind of reviewing our products and services, you know, one of the questions people ask is, what do I do for a daily weather briefing? You know, what is the first place to start? And I always tell them to look at our fire weather planning forecast. That's a product that gives you a general weather forecast for the next 5 days, and it's broken down by different microclimate zones. So depending on what zone you're in, if you're in San Fernando Valley, San Gabriel Valley, Santa Clarita Valley, you can get a fire weather zone specific for that area for the next 5 days. So that's a good starting point. And then when we have an actual incident, say a fire breaks out, or say you have a hazmat spill, or say you have a search and rescue, then you have the ability to request a spot weather forecast. And that's what we're going to go over at the end as a little tutorial on spot weather. And then finally, NFDR's trend forecast for those agencies that produce burn indices for staffing plans. That's the forecast product that helps generate those BIs. And then, of course, we'll talk about red flag warnings and fire weather watch. And finally, the incident meteorologist program. That's what I was telling you in the beginning. Rich Thompson is our incident meteorologist who goes out on fire location and provides direct support. So he was on, for example, the Thomas fire. So on our website, where do we go for each of this? At the end, I'll show you this, but just a quick synopsis here. Once you're on the fire weather page, and that's the link up at the top for the fire weather page, one area that you want to focus in is under forecast, and that's where you would get that fire weather forecast, planning forecast right there, as well as any red flag warning issuances. And then if you request a spot forecast, that's the second arrow right here in the yellow where it says spot forecast request. And finally, under tools, this is where you can look up the fire weather snooper program, which we'll also talk about here in a second. Okay, so spot forecast. Okay, everybody thinks about for wildfires. That's definitely the main purpose. But also remember, for prescribed burns, for hazmat, search and rescue, and even large events. So let's say you're planning an incident action plan for a major event like a marathon or a major sporting event or concert. You have the ability to request a spot forecast because weather could become a safety issue for the people involved in the gathering. So key reminders, whenever you do a spot forecast, always include the working contact number. So we need to get in touch with you, first to verify that we're giving you what you want, and second, if the weather's changing, we need to be able to get a hold of you to provide you updates. Also, if you have observations, there's nothing more important than good observations to help calibrate the forecast moving forward. And what I mean by that is, as you know, the climate here of the local area, from one rod station to the next, the weather can vary dramatically. So if you just depend on the rod stations, that may not tell you the clear picture of what's happening at your precise location. So if you're able to spend on-site observations right at your location, that's going to give us more detail than just saying the nearest rod station. Okay? And again, that phone number that I mentioned at the beginning, 988-6626 is the key number that you can reach us 24/7. So we have 2 different conference calls. So some of you may have been aware of our 8:30 GAC calls that we have. So Predictive Services hosts these calls out of Riverside. That's where they get all the weather forecast offices from Oxnard, San Diego, Hanford, sometimes Monterey, and even out to Phoenix and Vegas. So it's kind of a regional call, big picture call. And we're also getting representation from each fire agency. And if there's an IMET on a fire, they're also joining on as well. So it's a pretty broad phone call at 8:30. And then at 1 o'clock, we narrow it down to just our local area. And what I mean by that is if it's just a Santa Ana wind event, now we're going to get LA and Ventura County fire for our area. If it's a sundowner event, maybe we're just tapping into Santa Barbara County for their area. And on that call, we can go into a lot greater detail for the affected area and ask a lot more questions, okay? So things like, what's the precise time of the onset of the Santa Ana or sundowner? What locations are going to be affected? When is the wind reversal going to go from offshore to onshore? How deep is the marine layer? All these subtle details that can greatly impact the decision making. And usually we will have at least one representative from each major fire agency, as well as the fire behavior analyst. Drew Smith a lot of times jumps in for LA County. Okay, so to highlight again the differences between watches and warnings. So fire weather watch, red flag warning, sometimes people think, are there different criteria between a watch and a warning? And the answer is no. It's exactly the same criteria, but a watch means that there's a possibility, a 50% possibility that red flag conditions could occur. And usually you want to give lead time of about 2 to 3 days, okay? So we're trying to project outward and saying these particular zones have a 50% probability of hitting red flag conditions. And then as we move closer to the event and we have more certainty, if we think it's about 80% probability, then we're going to upgrade that watch to a warning. And for a red flag warning, the desired lead time now goes up to 24 hours. So again, fire weather watch, I would say most of the time it's going to be in that 48 to 72 hour window. And then once we're within about 24 hours or less, we're going to try to upgrade that to red flag. This is a key factor, must have sufficiently dry fuels. So you can have the weather component, but if you don't have the fuels, we're not going to issue the red flag. So what are those criteria? Assuming the fuels are sufficiently dry, these are the criteria again in review. Two main criteria is they both require wind and humidity to overlap. So the main one that people focus on is sustained winds 25 miles an hour or gusts to 35 miles an hour, combined with relative humidity of 15% or less. And those two factors have to come together for a duration of 6 hours or more. So that duration is really critical because if it's just a short little burst of wind and low humidity, then we're just going to highlight that and say brief critical fire weather conditions are occurring. But now if you have a 6 hour or longer event, now this is of sufficient duration, and that's what will prompt a fire weather watch or red flag warning. So sometimes you have a case where the humidities are down to even 10% or less, and that's criteria 1. For that criteria, because of the lower humidity, you only need sustained wind of 15 miles an hour or a gust to 25 miles per hour, again with a duration of 6 hours or more. Third criteria, occasionally, we're going to have dry lightning event. And fourth is forecaster discretion. So sometimes you're going to have situations that don't fit criteria 1 and criteria 2, but it's still significant. An example, station fire. It was a late season heat wave, didn't have much wind factor, but it had all the other components, a heat wave, low humidity, poor recovery, dry fuels, and long duration. So that's where the forecaster can invoke forecaster discretion in coordination with the affected fire agencies. Another example would be up in Santa Barbara with the sundowners. Typically their humidities during sundowners don't always get below 15%. Some of their biggest fires, like the Hazasita, the T fire, those were events that happened where the RHs stayed a little bit above 15%. And we knew that going into the event, but we can still invoke a red flag warning because the winds were so fierce with both of those events. Okay? How many of you have looked at Fire Weather Snooper before? Okay, so this will be new for a lot of people. If you haven't looked at this, I highly encourage, if one thing you take away today, this is a great tool that's been developed locally within our office. And the idea behind it is when we're in red flag situation, the fire agencies and the media are always asking, well, what stations are in red flag criteria and for how many hours have they been in red flag? And that's what this tool does. And so you basically see up at the top is a list of all the stations over here. And then you have the humidities, your wind speeds, duration, meaning how many hours you've hit red flag. For example, Malibu Hills at the top, you see at 12. That means it's hit 12 hours or more of red flag condition. And what was our time frame that we needed for red flag? 6 hours. So therefore, as me, the person who verifies all of our red flags in the office, I can scan down that list and look for all the stations that have hit 6 hours or more and check off the box for that zone as a hit for red flag criteria. Then it also includes a 10-hour field moisture, as well as temperature, elevation, and zone. So very handy. The red areas mean those are the ones that are in red flag criteria. The green ones represent stations that are approaching criteria. The new snooper also allows you to sort by weather element. So let's say you want to see all the strongest winds. You can click on wind up at the top, and it will sort all the winds from highest to lowest. Same for humidity. If you click on RH, it will sort the lowest humidities. 10-hour field moisture stick right here, same thing. You can sort those for the driest fields. Okay. Also, you can customize it by zone. So let's say you're only interested in the San Gabriel Valley, San Fernando Valley. There's ways that you can customize this as well by geographical area. So you don't get the huge list of stations. You get just the stations within your area. Okay? At the end, I'll show you the link on the website. Okay, so these are some of the notable fires. Obviously, you guys are fully aware of that, but a very active season and late, as we noticed in December. The key factor there is we had one of the longest duration Santa Ana winds in early December that we've seen. In fact, in over 10 years of keeping red flag statistics, I've never seen a red flag warning be extended for as long a period as we had during that December, during the Thomas Fire and the Creek Fire. And one of the key contributors, besides the strong winds, were obviously the very dry fuels, because we had not received any rainfall as of early December. So I want to give you a little timeline of how we put products and services in play before a major event. Because sometimes there's a lot behind the scenes things happening at the weather office that people may not be fully aware of. So if you look at the start time here, the Thomas Fire started on the evening of December 4th, Creek Fire later that night. And this period, 4th through 6th, was where we had several of those fires going at one time. So what was happening before December 4th? And it all goes back to even November 30th, about 5 days prior, where that was our first time where we actually had a conference call talking about this Santa Ana wind event coming up. And then on December 1st, we upgrade to a partner email. So if you're not on the list and you want to be, this is a special email that we send out to our partners, fire, emergency managers, media. And this, if you see one of these in your inbox, then you know there's a significant event occurring in the next few days. Okay, that's the idea behind the partner email. If you want to be on the list, just let me know and we can add you to the partner email list. So we first advertised that on December 1st, and then also on December 1st, we issued the Fire Weather Watch, talking about moderate to strong several days Santa Ana wind event. And then by December 2nd, we're updating the partner email, and now we're talking about extended period of moderate to strong Santa Ana winds with critical fire weather conditions Monday through Thursday, so highlighting a 4-day period, strongest and potentially damaging Monday night into Tuesday, and that was the event that occurred for the Thomas Fire. So then by December 3rd, we're upgrading the Fire Weather Watch to red flag warning. Now we're using wording that this will likely be the strongest and longest duration Santa Ana wind event we have seen so far this season. So part of what we're trying to do is issue these products in a good amount of lead time, but part of it is also to capture the urgency of a major event. You know, what separates a red flag warning, a more garden variety red flag, versus a big time red flag of long duration. And that's what we're trying to achieve by either issuing it through our partner emails, issuing it through red flag warnings, hosting webinars. So there's different ways we can communicate it, and different people receive the information in different manners. Okay, so finally we had a special call again on December 3rd for the fire agencies. And then by December 5th, we actually deployed Rich to the Thomas Fire the next day. Okay, so then that, of course, leads to the debris flow situation that we had. That's my boss out there after the event up in Montecito. And just a little background, of course, we all know that the wildfires increases the potential for runoff and erosion. But what was kind of interesting is my boss came up with these stats here. Debris flows travel at speeds of around 10 miles per hour and up to as high as 35 miles per hour. And of course, the debris flow threat, usually we talk about the first year, maybe the second year, But sometimes, in certain situations, can be a concern even up to 5 years after the fire. So this is a very important slide. This, besides Fire Weather Snooper, I'd say this is the other big takeaway from today's presentation, is these understanding of how important rainfall rates are to debris flows. Okay, everybody always thinks about storm totals. You know, how much rain are we going to get from an event? You know, 1 to 2 inches coast, 2 to 4 inches foothills and mountains. Okay, but that's really not the story here for debris flows. You want to look at what's happening, how that rainfall is distributed. If it's going to be spaced out over a long period of time of more moderate intensity, it's not going to cause much issue. But if a lot of that comes in a very short amount of time, say an hour or 30 minutes or 15 minutes, that can cause the problems. Okay, and that we've seen that repeatedly, time and time again. And I looked back, not just at Montecito, but I looked at some of the other debris flows that we had, like with the El Capitan, we had a debris flow last year. We had one at Camarillo Springs a few years ago. And they all resemble the same type of theme. That was high intensity rainfall in a short period of time. So the way this works is that we are partnering with USGS. So the National Weather Service is the weather expert. USGS is the soil expert. So the USGS looks at the soil conditions after each of these fires and determines a threshold of what they consider a threat to trigger a debris flow. And this is the guidance that they typically provide us, meaning that if you get a ½ an inch in 1 hour, or 0.3 inches in 30 minutes, 0.20 inches in 15 minutes, those are the rain intensities that they feel could trigger a debris flow. Now, it doesn't tell you how significant a debris flow, but at least it's a general guidance that tells you a debris flow could occur. Okay? So then they went back and actually went through some different cases of different debris flows. And the main thing out of this graph is saying that once you're in the red area, those are where more significant debris flows have occurred. And now we're talking an order of an inch per hour. You know, 1 inch of rain, you come down here during a 1 hour period. So if you have an inch per hour, that's definitely a major threat, okay, for something significant. Okay, these are our background map, just showing in the Thomas Fire example, they'll put together these threat maps, you know, in the fire perimeter, what areas are of greatest concern to the debris flow. So you can see, if you look at Montecito right here in the red, they're kind of right here in that 60 to 80% probability of debris flow. But you see some areas were actually in the darker red, up above Ojai and up above Santa Paula. So there's definitely some high threat areas in Ventura County portion as well, not just in Montecito. So looking more specifically at the January 9th event, very interesting event to look at from a historical perspective. Obviously, we all know about the damage and the fatalities, but what I want to focus in on is what made that event so extreme. Now, first of all, for any major rain event, for a high intensity rain, you need 3 key things to come together. Obviously, you need the moisture, but you need a lot of lift in the atmosphere. Lift is what produces the rainfall intensity. And then instability allows clouds to grow vertically. If you've taken S290 or S390 and you've seen me talk about instability is what thunderstorms like to allow them to grow vertically, and that's what really dumps higher intensity rainfalls. So if you get lift, moisture, and instability all phasing together, that's going to give you an intense rain event. And that's what happened that night. Here was the moisture source, nice feed from the subtropics coming up. We call it a little atmospheric river of tropical moisture. But that's not the whole story, because if that was the case, then we would have had more extreme situations across all Southern California. But it seemed to really just focus mostly on Santa Barbara. So what happened is, around 4 a.m., that was the time of the debris flow. This is a forecast 72 hours in advance. So quite remarkable that even 72 hours in advance, the computer models had a really good idea of something intense was going to occur. And one of the things we're looking at are the upper level winds, which we call jet stream winds. Okay? So these upper level winds create forcing in the atmosphere, provide a lot of lift. And this is an exceptionally strong area focused right in towards Santa Barbara County right at that time of 4 a.m. So that took the moisture and helped provide the violent lift in the atmosphere. And to give you an idea of how remarkable that is, 125 miles an hour, a good storm, a good winter storm, would be about 70 to 80 miles per hour. So to have that be that much higher than normal is very significant for that event. So then, as we get closer to the event, we have these really high-resolution computer models that can kind of pinpoint what's the probability of rainfall per hour. Okay, so amazingly, this was created at 2 o'clock on January 8th, so the afternoon before, and it's actually pegging in yellow areas of pretty high-intensity rainfall with this bullseye of about 1.16 inches per hour. Now, these computer models aren't going to get it exactly pinpointed the exact area, but it at least gives you the picture that southern Santa Barbara County is going to be the area of focus here. Okay, and that's so somewhere between, say, Goleta to the county line. That was our main concern. And what was our USGS threshold per hour? What do we need to be of concern? Half an inch, right? So now the computer model at this point is saying over an inch per hour. So over twice the USGS threshold. So at this point, we are advertising rainfall rates pretty consistently through the event up to an inch per hour. But still, the question is, where exactly are those higher rates going to occur? Are they going to occur out here toward Gaviota? Are they going to occur in Santa Barbara? Are they going to occur in Montecito, Carpinteria? That part is still a little bit uncertain. That's why everything's kind of a probability when it comes to debris flow. All you can say is that certain areas are more higher threat than others. And the other thing that had going with it is the southerly flow associated with the storm. And the mountains are east-west across Santa Barbara, just like they are with you guys here in the Verdugos or the Santa Monicas. Those are east-west ranges. So anytime you have southerly flow with a lot of moisture, that provides that orographic lift. So that was another component that added to the high rainfall amounts. Okay, so the model is showing over an inch per hour. This was an example of our storm total graphic. How much rainfall were we expecting for that entire event? And you can see we almost were predicting 4 inches of rain for Santa Barbara. But again, storm total doesn't really tell you the story. The funny thing was, this was actually over forecasted. We only ended up getting about 2 to 2.25 inches in Santa Barbara. So we were way over forecasted, but the bottom line was all that rain came in a very short amount of time. Okay? And these are the kind of threats that we were communicating before the event. So on our first webinar, Friday, January 5th, we were already talking about significant threat of debris flow across recent burn areas. Still at that point, we don't know, is it going to be mostly Santa Barbara or LA County? 3 days in advance, we really don't have the ability to say exactly which county is going to get it. But as we got closer to the event by January 8th, now we upgraded it from significant to extreme, okay, highest level of threat. And now by that time it becomes clear that Santa Barbara County is going to be at greatest risk. And then looking at a timeline here, this is also kind of interesting. So just like the fire weather threat, now if we look at the debris flow, how do we prepare our partners for a major event? So the time of occurrence of the debris flow was 3:45 in the morning, January 9th. And you look, so even 6 days in advance, we're first advertising. We're sending out one of those special partner emails, and we're talking about threat of heavy rainfall. Most significant potential impact will be flash flooding and debris flows in recent burn areas, including the Thomas burn area. We're also talking in our area forecast discussion of rates 1/2 to 1 inch per hour, looks likely. So even back 6 days, we're talking about significant rainfall intensities. Then we hold a special partner webinar where you can actually log in on a conference call, and you can look at the graphics as our managers kind of walk you through the event. So we had 84 partners attending on that webinar. Also, my boss goes up to the press conference up in Santa Barbara on January 5th. And then by January 6th, the evening of January 6th, quite remarkable, we're actually already issuing a flash flood watch almost 3 days in advance here. of the event. Normally, it's about 24 hours. So that's how much confidence we had that it was going to be a pretty significant event. And in that flash flood watch, we're saying there's a strong potential for flash flooding and mud and debris flows in and around the burn areas. And then we have a special webinar update where we upgrade that threat from significant to extreme. And finally, the flash flood warning. Remember the difference between the watch and the warning? The watch means there's that possibility of the event occurring. Now the warning means we're seeing something on radar or rain gauges that now tells us we're hitting those rainfall intensities and it's moving towards the burn area. So in this case, that occurred at 2:30 in the morning, still with over an hour's lead time before the debris flow. Here was the actual first issuance of that warning for the Montecito area. And you can see the Thomas Fire, so included the whole Thomas Fire and down through Montecito. And this is kind of interesting. I don't know if the loop will play here. Let me see. Yeah, so this is a radar loop, okay? So what you're seeing is a timeline at 1 o'clock in the morning. This is Montecito right here in the red triangle. And the radar, of course, the lighter color, like blue and green, is light rain. Then it goes to yellow and oranges, more moderate. And then the red is the greater concern for the heavy rainfall intensities. So 1 o'clock in the morning, just to kind of show you how short-lived this event actually was, 1 o'clock in the morning, it's barely anything happening in Montecito, okay? Where the heavier rain is still off Point Conception. So let's walk you through timeline here. So by 2 o'clock in the morning, you can still see nothing that really catches your eye except that area north of Point Conception looks pretty extreme, but that's kind of heading north up toward Vandenberg and Lompoc. Now I want to go back to about 2:30 because 2:30 a.m. was the time of that warning, remember on the timeline. So they were starting to see rainfall hit some of these gauges that were starting to exceed those ½ inch per hour. They still didn't realize how extreme it was going to be because it was still evolving at that time. So 2:30, some moderate rain moving into Montecito, but nothing too extreme. But this line right here is the culprit. Okay, this thin little line starting to develop. And everything else, like I said, was moderate to locally heavy, but nothing too extreme yet. So here we are at 3:10 in the morning. You can see that line becoming more organized, extending through the channel. Okay, we were starting to get pretty good rainfall gauge reports starting to occur after 3 in the morning up towards Santa Barbara, these high-intensity rainfall rates. But the most extreme was still out here over the ocean. And the problem with that is you don't have any rain gauges out over the ocean. So you really don't know other than what the radar is estimating. So remember, radar is an estimator. Rain gauges are your actual, okay? And then by 3:30, now you can see that line coming together, and that's that thin line of really intense rain that was moving through Santa Barbara, and here we are just 10 minutes away from Montecito. And there it was, right at 3:40. So that is just amazing how quickly that evolves from 1 a.m. to 3:40 in the morning. And it's that one intense line that really came together. Now, we had some heavier rain into Ventura and LA with the same storm, but nothing that had that kind of really high intensity that we saw there. And then if we move forward just after, by 4 o'clock a.m., you can see that line has already pushed east. Okay, so you can see it was really about a 10 to 15 minute burst that did all the damage. Okay, that's what's so extreme. Okay, then looking at the actual rainfall rates, these are actual rain gauges in the area that show us the kind of rates that we saw. So if we just focus in on Montecito right here, and you go to the hourly rainfall rate, this is what actually fell at the Montecito rain gauge, 0.95 inches per hour. Some of these other gauges actually hit over an inch an hour, some even as high as an inch and a half up in the foothills. But if you just focus on Montecito, where the damage occurred, an inch an hour, that's about what the computer model said. Remember, going back to the computer projections, that's about what we were advertising were 1 inch per hour rates. But the problem is, 1 inch per hour, how is it distributed through that hour? If it's graduated through the entire hour, it still would be concerning. But the problem is, out of that 0.95 inches, 0.77 of that occurred in 30 minutes, and 0.73 of it occurred in 15 minutes. That's the problem. When it occurred in that 15-minute interval, if you go back to what the USGS threshold was, anybody remember that, what it was for 15-minute threshold? 0.2. So now you see where the problem is, 0.2, and we had 0.73. So 3.5 times what the USGS threshold is for 15-minute rainfall. And if you take it a step further, out of the 0.73, over 1/2 inch fell in 5 minutes. Okay, so that's amazing, and that's not the only gauge that had these extreme rates. We see other ones that also had 3 4/10 of an inch in 5 minutes. Okay, so that's the key part to really understand, is not to think about just storm totals. Don't even think about 3 and 6 hours. It's what's happening in an hour or less that can really cause the damage. Okay? And here is a footage of a webcam in the area just to show you how quickly it occurred. This is at 3:49 a.m. in Montecito near Cold Springs Debris Basin. And you can see the debris flow caught on the webcam here and how quickly time. So at least gave us some ground truth at 3:49 in the morning to see how, the exact timing of when it occurred. And then this is the path, just showing the red dots are showing where the homes got damaged there from the debris flow. You can see, so generally followed down these canyons from the mountain areas. So then, interestingly, we had an atmospheric river event that you probably remember about a month ago that was hyped up pretty good, especially in the media, and it had a lot of potential. But what we want to do is kind of compare that January 9th event with the March 20th through 22nd. So notice this was a 3-day event, long duration, whereas January 9th occurred obviously in a very short amount of time. And this atmospheric river discussion that you hear in the media a lot, this March event was actually a strong atmospheric river, okay, meaning it had high moisture content transported into Southern California, whereas the January 9th was only moderate. So in terms of moisture content, the March event was significantly stronger. But the January 9th had all those factors coming together at one time, that lift and instability that I was talking about. And this kind of really tells the story. So if you look at the rainfall rates, this is a 5-minute rate plot. So you see the big spike up here in Montecito, the blue spike. That's that 1/2 inch in 5 minutes that we saw in January 9th. So when you see that big spike, that's when you know you're in trouble. Whereas the March 20 through 22nd, if you look at 5-minute data, all the little blues are very well behaved. It's a nice steady rain through the period. So you didn't get any of those big spikes during the event. So this event had quite a bit more rain than January 9th, but again illustrates how important the intensity is. So finally, how do you receive the information from us? And we talked about probably the best way is to be on our partner email list. And if you are not on it, you can email my manager, Eric Bolt, at eric.bolt@noaa.gov if you want to be on that partner email list. Or you can send me an email and I'll get it done as well. And again, really great. All of our partners are on this list. And it's a way of catching people's attention. We're not going to send it every day. It's just going to be once in a while, anytime we see a major event. It could be heavy rain. It could be a thunderstorm. It could be fire danger, a damaging wind event, high surf. Those are some of the examples. You can also be on our notification for text and email alert. And this is, again, just for core partners. You can actually go onto that website. And again, Eric, my manager, if you have any problems, can help get you set up. And it's kind of a nice program for notification because you can be right at the forefront of when warnings get notified. Instead of like trying to go to our website or watching it on TV, it will actually send it through text alert right to you. And finally, for the really big events, we host these webinars, go-to webinars during the events. Great opportunity for you to jump on and watch us discuss the event through graphics, through PowerPoint, and then have a chance to ask questions at the end. Okay, if you haven't followed us on Twitter and Facebook, especially on Twitter, it's a great way during an event for us to send little snippets of information to highlight concerns, and people have found that to be very useful. Again, our website, weather.gov/Los Angeles, and our phone number that you want to keep for your notes, 988-6626. Okay, before I sign off, I just wanted to show you a couple things on the website. Okay, so here was the website, the weather.gov/LOX. And again, the main thing you want to notice is that on the map, remember we're covering 4 counties, LA, Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo. So if there are any watches, warnings, advisories, it's going to highlight it right there. But what I want to point you to is if you haven't been on our website, the 2 main links to bookmark are Fire Weather right here and Fast Page. So if you go to the Fire Weather, remember in the beginning we talked about if you want fire weather forecast, you go right here under Forecast, and here's your fire weather planning forecast that we talked about. Red flag warning is right here. And what I wanted to take a minute was going over the spot request. So if you want to request a spot forecast, you click on Spot Forecast Request, and this is the interface that you'll see. How many of you have ever had to issue a spot forecast before? Okay, so during your career, you may be asked to do this at some point. And if you do, once you're on this page, you have 2 things you can look at, a monitor page and a request page. So let's say you're requesting a brand new spot forecast. Come over here to Request. And this is where you can enter in your location. You can do it a couple ways. If you have a latitude and longitude, you can punch that in right here. But let's just say you want to do it for a city. And let's say we do it for Burbank. And I hit Plot Address. It'll just take a point in downtown Burbank right here. And then ask you what type of incident. Is it wildfire? Is it prescribed burn, hazmat, or a large event for special event? Let's say it's a prescribed fire. And then right here is where you hit Generate Spot Request. And they'll make you fill out this page. Everything in red is required elements. So you have to give your project a name. You've got to indicate what agency you're from, who you are as far as requesting official. And then, very important, like I mentioned before, phone number right here, email address right here. We can email it to you, and that way you can forward it through your agency. Here's the latitude and longitude that carried over from the previous page. Obviously, if you have elevation information, that's helpful. And then aspect would be helpful as well. Then once you're done filling all that out, then you come down to here. This is the part that sometimes confuses people. And you see 2 things. You have a deliver forecast and a forecast starting. So forecast starting means what time is your prescribed burn going to be? Okay, so let's go ahead and enter in a number here. And let's say it is tomorrow. Let's see. Okay, let's say you're going to do a burn tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. a.m. Okay, I specified there. The deliver forecast means what time do you want the forecast by? What time do you want that forecast delivered to you? And that's up to you. If you want it this afternoon, you could just punch in, okay, I want it by 1600 hours this afternoon. If you don't need it till tomorrow morning, you can specify that as well. Okay? And then down here is where you actually enter in what periods. Do I just need it for tomorrow because I'm doing a one-day burn? And maybe I just need for Tuesday. But let's say you're doing multiple days of burning. Then you could click Tuesday, Tuesday night, and Wednesday, and then you pick what elements you want. You know, if you need all these elements, then that's fine. If you just need certain ones, you just pick certain elements. Once you're done with all that, this is where you can also enter in observations if you spin weather. And then finally, you hit submit request. And within minutes, or actually seconds, it shows up into our office. And if it's a wildfire, we treat that as the highest threat. And we'll drop everything what we're working on. And we can actually get a turnaround time of about 20 minutes. Okay? Nowadays, with social media, we can actually get a head jump on these spots even before you guys call us. And if we see something breaking on the news or on social media, we can draft the spot all ready to go, and then by the time someone actually requests it, we say, oh, there it is, we got it ready to go, and within a couple minutes. Okay? So that's the spot weather, and then the other thing I just wanted to show you was that fire weather snooper. So for fire weather snooper, remember you go under tools, go under weather tools, and let's see, actually they moved it. It's under local now. So under tools, local, fire weather snooper. Click on that. Okay, so again, you see a lot of observations. Notice nothing in green, nothing in red, meaning that no current conditions right now are at or approaching red flag conditions. So again, you can customize this. And remember, what I just wanted to emphasize is that you can sort by different elements. So when I hit wind here, it's going to put the highest winds at the beginning. If I want to do RH, I can sort it by lowest humidity. It can also give you a readout. So for the last 24 hours of observations for a particular site. And let's say you were in red flag and you want to know which hours did it hit red flag. That little readout can tell you, it will actually color code it in red which hours are hitting the red flag criteria. And then you can also go over here under this section and hit map version. And if you prefer to look at it in a more graphical sense, it will highlight the weather stations here. And again, color coded red or green if you're at or approaching red flag criteria. Okay? So any other questions from the website or anything that I talked about here?
Is there already talk about using this across the state? It's like, we go to California, Central Valley, those places. I mean, it's great for us in the LA area and everything, but
yeah,
you go to
great.
We're going on a strike team up north, we're looking at a forecast.
Right. No, great question. The fire weather snooper, yes, there are plans to push it to other parts of the state. In fact, when we had our visitors from regional and national headquarters a couple years ago, they were so impressed with this tool and heard the feedback from the fire agencies that were visiting. They said, we need to get this in every office. So they're exactly thinking the same way you are, just for that reason that you mentioned. And it's already started. Our programmer in our office, one of our local programmers, is trying to customize it to fit other offices. Here's the issue, is every office has their own red flag criteria. So he's got to adapt it locally for each office, which he's going to do. But he's already got, I think, Monterey and San Diego taken care of, and they're already on this as well. But it will keep expanding to other areas. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah. Well, good morning, guys. I'm Dave Stone with the CALOES Region 1. And so this, every year come out and do the strike team refresher. And so the things this year we're going to talk about is some agreements. We're going to talk about the CFA agreement, talk a little bit about. I passed out to everybody blank F-42. So if you're an overhead, line medic, line EMT, safety officer, REM, take it with you, put it in your kit so you have at least one. Last year was last probably 2 or 3 years been real busy, and last year we actually had some of our California overhead out of state. We had Oregon, and then we had actually some people up in Montana and Wyoming last year. I got a phone call from one of the California, it was a line medic, and he called me and said, hey, I'm here in Wyoming, and I brought a Form 42, but I have 3 other guys here that didn't. And even though this is a California-centric reimbursement tool, it can be used if you're out of state, because most of the out-of-state local government, federal, don't have a reimbursement mechanism form to fill out. They have the federal government FSLA 5 forms, but generally for you as local government, you fill out the 42. So if you're planning to go out, overhead or REM, take one of these with you, put in your kit. I do have some extra if you need a second one to put in your kit. I don't have that many extra, but if you're a strike team leader, it's a good idea to have at least 6 with you, 1 for each engine and then 1 for yourself. That way you got a starter. And when you're out there on the fires and we get you demobbed and out the door, we try to give you an extra form to take with you so you get your starter for the next fire. Okay, and when you go out, whether it's an overhead, strike team leader, task force leader, it's really your responsibility to be prepared, know the agreement you're under. You guys have a real good dispatch center. Verdugo Dispatch, they're really good at making sure you got the right tools to do your job, at least the paperwork part. This is a copy of the resource order, and if you notice at the top it says financial codes. There's a circle up here, and if you look at it close enough, there is 4 or 5 different codes listed there. Sometimes when you get your order filled out and you get it printed and you walk in to check in, and you're looking at this top box, it's a drop-down menu in ROS. It gives you basically all of the different types of finance codes for that incident. And if you look there, it has a P code, which is a federal government code. It has CFAA, CMA, which is CAL FIRE force codes. And then it has another one, which is a local government code for that fire. And so when you see that up there at the top, you may see it says P something, whatever. That doesn't tell you the financial code that you're under. It just tells you that whatever the ROS operator, when they're loading and doing their thing, sometimes they default to the last one that they did. So they may accidentally put your finance code incorrect. So when you get the order from Verdugo, which I don't see too much of an issue there because they're pretty squared away, is down here in line 12. This whole area here is specifically for your order. And this circle here is finance code, says CFAA on there. And that's what you're looking for to make sure that you're ordered correctly. We can fix it if you get out the door, you're in a hurry, you get to the incident, and then you check in. The check-in for the incident really isn't looking at your finance code. We are, because that determines how we're going to fill out your forms. And so we can fix that. It just takes a little more work for us. And so it's easier to fix it before you leave here to head to the fire. Basic agreements that we have. The top one there, the fire chiefs don't like that one because that one means you're going for free. As a firefighter, you just want to go to the fire. But there's different ways you're ordered. And MMA, Master Mutual Aid, it's state of California. And if you go out the door, it's day-to-day auto aid. You have agreements with, in this op area, everybody's got an agreement with each other. You guys have no borders. You just provide service. And that's basically a type of Master Mutual Aid. If you go with, for example, we had the La Tuna fire, and most of that fire was on local lands. And so if Burbank is requesting, Glendale had a piece of that too, right? There's Glendale, Burbank, and LA City. And if they're requesting strike teams or individual resources, generally speaking, it comes MMA, because they don't have, unless they have an agreement with each other, they don't really have an agreement for reimbursement. And so that's Master Mutual Aid. This State Fire and Rescue Resource Mutual Aid Guideline document, that's they used to call it 7 points of light. And that was and I'll talk about that a little later, but that was the way that the state of California, CAL FIRE, could help local government on a wildland fire when they don't have a common border or another agreement. And so they'll come out, they'll provide wildland resources. As long as the fire is threatening, it's out of control. Once you have the forward progress stopped, the threat to structures is abated, then you have to determine if you're going to maintain the use of those resources. Then they're going to start talking about reimbursement for the resource. The third one, there's one we generally are under, the CFA, California Fire Assistance Agreement. And we'll talk more about that one. And you may have a local agreement with local forest. I know Pasadena, don't they have something with the Angeles? And then I think Glendale does, Burbank. So everybody has an agreement with the forest. So you may send resources to Angeles to help them out, and then it's an agreement between you and them. It's usually updated every year. And then the one at the bottom is the CFMA. That's an agreement between CAL FIRE and the federal government on how they're going to help each other with resources. The three that we typically see out there for local government, like I said, Master Mutual Aid, generally there's no money involved. They should help each other out, neighbor helping neighbor. The second one, the CFA, that's our typical reimbursement tool. And then the local force is whatever you've agreed to. And we talked about Angeles for that. The California Fire and Rescue Resource Mutual Aid Guideline document, that's where we talked about 7 points of light. I like 7 points of light easier. It's easier to say. And with that one, it's a CAL FIRE, like I mentioned, they come out and help you out. One of the things that you have to be aware of is you can utilize fixed wing and CAL FIRE will cover that cost. But if it's generally the closest fixed wing gets launched, and if it's a federal government contract fixed wing, then there's a payment involved. So it's only for CAL FIRE assets that we're talking about. And you got to be real careful, because you don't want to say, hey, I know those federal government aircraft are closer, but can I get that one over there that's free? Generally, that's not the case. It's generally whatever is closest gets launched. And that's going to go through South Ops. But that shouldn't be a reason not to launch aircraft, though. So be careful on that. And then generally, it's going to be at the level, I think for most of your agencies, at the chief officer level. Is that usually for requesting, I don't know, is Verdugo, is that how they do it? Yeah, generally it's going to be a chief officer has the authority. It wouldn't be generally speaking, the first team captain's not going to be making that decision. It depends on the agency. One of the things that is somewhat always confusing to people is how we get local government connected with state and federal agencies. And so what I try to do is I look at this, I know this, it's hard to believe sometimes, but this thing called a double yellow line, what's that mean on a roadway? Can't cross it, right? I don't think people know that anymore. I see that a lot, people crossing, or a solid line, you're not supposed to go around. I don't think it. But anyway, the double yellow tells us that local government does their thing, and the CAL FIRE and the federal government does their thing. And so they have the same basic system. Generally for us, local fire agency, Verdugo dispatch, they're going to dispatch the resources. If it gets beyond the capability of the local dispatch center, then they're going to bump it up to the op area. And for you guys have kind of an interesting relationship because the dispatch center and the op area are fairly similar. And so generally, this ends up equaling this for your agencies. If it gets beyond the capability of Area C, then it'll bump up to Region 1, which is LA County, handles the Region 1 responsibilities. If it gets beyond the capability of Region 1, we have I guess we can still call it that, we have a sister region, which is Region 6, which is the Riverside, San Bernardino, San Diego, that area. We can reach over to them and we can get resources out of Region 6. If it goes beyond Region 6, then we go to this up at Sacramento and we order our resources throughout the rest of the regions. State of California, we have 6 operational regions, and then within those regions we have the op areas are generally going to be either counties or subsets of the counties. Like LA County, we have area, we have A, B, C, E, F, and G are the 6 that we have in LA County. It's large, dense, so they divide it up. To access the other side here, either way, we have to exhaust the resources within our side first, and then we can go across and request resources. So when you think about line medics, line EMTs, safety officers, overhead personnel, division group, those types of positions, generally that's what we're getting calls from the federal or state agency for, and those will come through. When there's a request, it'll come through the local forest, and it'll come across to the op area or to the region, and then it gets filled from there. So sometimes when there's a fire up in the Angeles and you're thinking, how come I'm not there? It's because they're using their internal resources first, just like we would do here. Because you wouldn't, on a day-to-day basis, you wouldn't have an engine from Ventura City show up here on a fire because you got all your resource here that you're going to use first. Same thing there. You wouldn't expect that an engine from Glendale would go to a fire up in the Angeles if they have all their resources handling their own problem. And so the double line, it goes through the dispatch centers. And I think for Verdugo, generally it's going to come, well, Angeles can call Verdugo direct, or if it's something that's beyond that, then they'll go to Region 1 and come back down to Area C through that. So it may take a little longer than you think, and you're waiting, you got your bags packed, you're ready to go, you're thinking, why is it taking so long? And generally, like I said, the Forest Service agencies and CAL FIRE, they have their own system, so they try to fill it within their system. And that could mean out of state, because the federal government is the whole United States, and so you may see where they're bringing safety officers, medics, and EMTs from out of state and not coming to local government first. They try not to do that, but they may have a trainee that's a high priority trainee, and they may bring them from out of state. So we've seen that where they brought a division supervisor from Florida all the way out to here for a fire because that was a priority trainee. And when we had all kinds of division supervisors here. But it's their fire, it's their system. If they can't fill it, then they give it to us to fill. CFA agreement, you know, I was teasing about the 256 slides, so you guys can relax a little bit there. It's like 251, I think. But the first year I had this job and I was teaching this class, there was like a 250 slide program, and I was, you know, I figure a slide a minute is generally the rule of thumb for teaching. So I thought, you're giving me an hour, and I got basically about how many hours worth of. So I went through and chopped a whole bunch of slides out. This one, I think that we're down to about 95, and then of that I kind of chopped that down. But there's a lot of it. Every year there's something new that comes up. We want to make sure you have the latest information on that. CFA agreement used to be called the 5-party agreement, and then when the 6th agency joined, they made it the 6-party agreement, and then when the 7th agency joined, they said, you know, we'll just call it something else. So it's the California Fire Assistance Agreement. For local government, OES is your sponsor. We're signed the agreement, and we're at the table for local government. This just gives you just a snapshot during the fire season. This is a Detweiler fire. Anybody go Detweiler up in Mariposa? We sent a lot of strike teams up to Detweiler. Gives you an idea of how many resources from the different area. Local government, 192 engine companies were at the Detweiler from local government. 29 from the federal government, 92 from CAL FIRE. It's a pretty good commitment from CAL FIRE. And then 29 that were the OES engines that we provide. We have 126 Type 1 engines in our system, and we have 40 Type 3s. Soon we're going to be purchasing some more Type 3s and Type 6s. It's just waiting for approvals, budget, all the things that have to take place. So they're not sitting in a barn somewhere ready to go. The CFA, what it does, it provides us, this is what it provides in there. What the reimbursement rate's going to be, how we respond, types of personnel, equipment, how it's outfitted, the inventories that were expected. Every year we do a salary survey so that each agency is getting paid their rate of pay. So if it's a fire captain from Glendale, the reimbursements for a top step fire captain from Glendale. Pasadena, top step fire captain from Pasadena. Years ago they wanted to do it where it was going to be an average of all the departments in the state. And when you think of 1,061 fire departments in the state of California, with quite a number of them as volunteer or part paid call, you can imagine the difference in the rate of pay if we went base rate average. Be like going to dinner with your friends. You have a Coke and a cheeseburger. He buys a steak and a beer, and then he says, "Let's split the bill." You're thinking, "Wait, you got more than I got." So we can't do it that way. So we do it where everybody fills out a survey, and we pay you what it is your rate of pay. But it's at time and a half, so we do cover a little bit of the backfill behind at the firehouse. Also, this is a big deal, portal to portal. We pay for 24/7 for you to be out there. That's been under attack for the last number of years. Federal government would like to just pay 16 hours max a day and 8 hours because you're sleeping. In their mind, you shouldn't get paid to sleep. But so far, we've been able to keep the portal to portal intact. And then we do have some stuff with workers' comp percentages are added to that. Unemployment insurance is added to that. And then we also do cover some federal DOD and tribal under CFA. It does include travel and personnel rotations. And just as a rule of thumb, average strike team engine is about 25 to 40 grand a day for 24 hours. So if you're I think the 40 grand is the Santa Monica, Beverly Hills. That group is, I think, pushing to 40 grand a day. And the 25 grand is probably the LA County strike teams, the LA City strike teams. And so like I said, the reimbursement tool is the F-42. And there's a lot of words here, but all this basically says is traveling to and from the incident is on your agency. While you're on the incident, that the food, fuel, lodging is covered by the incident. Also, any damage or loss to equipment. It depends on how it's done. If it's investigated, you may or may not be reimbursed or for the lost damage to equipment. Just depends on the circumstances. And this is the thing people seem to forget right here. At no time will local government fire agencies seek reimbursement for travel expenses such as food, fuel, and lodging responding to, during, or returning from state of California unless documented and approved. So if you're a line medic and you get a call to go to Northern California, it's about a 10, 12-hour drive, and you say, I got to spend the night someplace on the way there, and I got to stop and get fuel for my rental vehicle. That's on you. If you stop and get fuel, you eat, you get a hotel room, that's all on you. The incident doesn't pay for that unless you can get it pre-approved. So those are things you have to think about when you're getting ready to leave, is talk to your home agency, ask to see if the incident will cover one night in a hotel on your way to the incident. They may or may not, but the idea being is it's on you. Coming back from the incident, traveling back home, same thing applies. If you stop and spend the night in a hotel, any food, fuel, that's on you. Once you check in at the incident until you demob, the incident's responsible for that. Now, if you get there too soon in the incident, they don't have fuel set up yet, or maybe the first dinner, you're kind of on your own, you can seek reimbursement for that. We have to make sure you keep the receipts, get approval. We help you with that on obtaining an S number for reimbursement. So those are things you have to remember. And in Exhibit H in the CFA is where it spells that all out. Doesn't matter how many times we tell you that, there's always someone shows up saying, hey, I got a hotel on the way up here, who's going to pay for it? And it's on the city credit card, and the city's going to want to get paid for it. Well, it's on you unless we can get the incident to cover it. But it's a lot easier if you do it before you leave, get approval, than once you get the incident and say, hey, I would like to get paid for this. It's a lot more difficult to get that. The incident may just deny it. More than likely they will. Personnel rotations, that's for the engine companies. It's a 7-day minimum. What is Area C you guys have decided? Is it 14? 7 days?
7 paid for. So essentially it's 8 if you count the travel day, right?
It'd be 9 total.
Right.
So you guys are 7-day rotation then?
We can do this. That's the only one that's paid for.
Well, a minimum 7. So if you go 14,
At 7, if we're on a 14-day assignment, at 7, the incident
you can do a rotation.
reimburse the rotation.
Yeah. It might end up being 10 days. It depends on how you do it. The key there is when you're the strike team leader and you're doing your tailboard before you take off and travel to the incident, what's one of the questions you ask the group? You have 21 people you're looking at. Okay, guys, we're going to be there at least 7 days, 9 total with travel. No parties, no weddings. You're not getting married. You know, you'd be surprised what come. Oh, by the way, I got a trip to Hawaii in 3 days. I thought I could squeeze this in for a little extra overtime. The idea being is before you travel, make sure everybody's good to go. And then, but it never fails. There's always 1 or 2, and if it's before 7 days, it's on your agency to cover that travel cost. So if you got to switch out a guy gets sick, an injury. Injuries, we kind of might be able to work that out with the incident if it's not your fault or something like that. You weren't doing something, you're off duty, you're staying in a dorm at a college, and you decide that you're going to do, the diving board looks like it'd be fun to dive off of it, and you get hurt. The incident's not going to cover that back and forth thing. But 7-day minimum. There's a form we'll fill out with you to provide that rotation. The incident has to be aware of the personal rotation usually about 36 to 48 hours before, so they can approve the rotation, so they'll pay for it. It's not an issue. The reason we do that is if the fire's looking pretty good, it looks like we're going to get a handle on it, the IC might start thinking about releasing Type 1 resources. So if he knows that there's a rotation coming up in 2 or 3 days, they may say, let's not do the rotation. We'll go ahead and demob that strike team. It's not a penalty thing. Don't think of it you're being penalized for that. It's more of a planning issue. Well, do we really need that? And so we'll be in the IC's office talking to them ahead of time, seeing if they need crew rotation. We'll be talking to you, the strike team leader, making sure you're aware of it. For your overhead, is it 14 or 7 for the overhead? For your safeties and medics and all that, is it?
Supposed to plan on set 14, but
So you give them 14 days, because that one you don't do a rotation. You just show up, you do your 14, go home. There's a misnomer there. Some people will be out, and they'll think they can go 21 days, 28 days. 14 is, it's 14 days excluding travel, so it's 16 total days. You're supposed to be out of there. You're not supposed to stay past 14 working days. Sometimes the fire chief or the designee at home doesn't understand the rules, and the guy that's working the fire is thinking, man, I can get another 7. I'm good to go. I'll go 21. 21's not in the picture, guys. It's 14. Unless the whole state's on fire, they need the people, there's some rules that have to be done by the incident for you to stay past 14. There's some things they have to do. It's part of the rules. And so I get guys to show up, check in, and they're thinking they're going to stay a month. Or, hey, I got nothing going. I'll stay 3 months. I'm good. Yeah, so the kid's got a birthday. I got an anniversary. It's all right. So it's supposed to be 14 days. And there's always some exceptions, but 14 is supposed to be the rules.
Chief,
Yes?
real quick, it's crew rotation, right? So whole strike team leaves at 7 if you're going to do it, not a guy or one engine company decides they want to go and the rest stay.
14 days is the max
Right.
for the whole strike team, for people to rotate. You'll find that and you guys are 7, you said?
We can rotate.
So it
That's
depe-
the
it
only time we'll rotate will be, because that's what's paid for.
A lot of it depends on home agency. And it's easier for us, paperwork-wise, if everybody rotates. But you're always going to get a firefighter, maybe the engineer. You might be staffing issues back home. And time of year, like we had the fire in December, the Thomas, a lot of guys were a little nervous about doing crew rotation because people have vacations and the MOU. And so I'm looking at the 14-day calendar. The 7 is the minimum to get the reimbursement for the rotation. And so if your agency decides that they can't find anybody to fill your spot, and you say, I'm willing to stay for 7 more days, and your agency's good with it, then you can stay past the 7. The 7 is the minimum to allow for a rotation that's paid by the incident.
I guess this is just to clear it up so we don't go home with it. I've never heard a chief officer offer to a single engine company to leave. It's always usually been, hey, either we all stay or we all go. Anybody got any issues? Does anybody need to go home? Because that's what we're going to do when we rotate.
I think a lot of that-
That's your internal policies.
A lot of that may come from the internal information of knowing that if we want to rotate out 7 people, we might as well wait goodbye because you're going to be going home. Because like you said, they're going to go, these city guys can stay for 14, they're all good to go. These guys want to send 7 people home. Let's just send them all back. So it's not to deal with it.
The rule, we go by it's a mobilization guide. If you go to the NWCG website and you look for the California Mobilization Guide, that is the Bible that dictates rotation of crew. It's not just local government, it's for the federal government, state, everybody's under that guideline. And so it talks about all those things, work rest cycles, all that, those are all included. A lot of that information is cut out and put in the CFAA. And so for you as an individual on an engine company, 14 is your max. Now, if you have an internal policy that says at 7 you rotate, then that's when you rotate. We're not going to dictate to an agency that says, we don't say, Chief, you got to keep all your people 14 days. After 7, they can rotate, and that's the incident. After 3 days, he can change people out.
Yeah, I think specifically to your question, it's really dependent on the strike team leader. If the strike team leader after 7 days says, okay, a couple guys from San Marino want to swap out, he may say, you all swap or none of you swap, and he may give the offer to the entire strike team. For the policy, it says at 7 days they will pay for reimbursement. We prefer to send guys that can be there for the 14. That's the hope. It's not always perfect, though. So really, it's strike team leader dependent though after 7.
And from the OES side of the house, my preference is, this is Dave Stone preference, everybody's 14 days because it's just cleaner, it's easier, it's just easier paperwork wise, it's easier for the incident management team, it's less things they got to think about. That's one of the reasons why we're out there, because we help the incident management team put together the crew rotations and things like that. And it's less of a headache for the strike team leaders. The strike team leader, it was problematic if 3-4 days into it, you get a guy come to you and say, hey, I'm trying to work a deal to get out of here because I got something came up. You know, if you got a sick family member, your kid's sick, something comes up that's an emergency, the incident's going to, whatever you need to do, take care of it for your incident. But saying that 2 guys leave, 1 guy leaves, that's a personal between your agency, your op area, how you want to handle that. I don't get into that. I won't be the judge saying that the strike team leader is wrong by saying if 1 guy leaves, everybody leaves. That's internal to your policies. I don't want to get in the middle of that. All I know is that 14 is the max, excluding travel. At 7, you can do a rotation that's covered and paid for by the incident. And then if there's anything happens between that, we'll work with you on that. I don't know if it helped you at all.
Yeah, well, his question, he actually answered it the way it is.
Yeah, because that's more internal policies.
Chief, isn't there an option at 14 too, where you could extend them to 21, there's an extension clause?
Well, yes and no. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to rotate everybody at 14. Generally overhead at 14 days if there's a shortage in the system. And what it has to be an agreement between the person that's doing the work. Like if let's say you're a line medic, and they're asked, the incident comes, you say, hey, can you stay past 14? And you're like, yeah, sure, I'm good with it. Well, that's fine, but your home agency has to approve it. So you have to call home and get permission. You can't just say, yeah, my home agency's good with it.
There's a form, actually.
Yeah, there's a rotation form. It's in the MOB guide. Yeah, there's a form. The incident actually has to fill it out. It has to be approved by your home agency, approved by, we have to look at it and say we're okay with it. I think sometimes the safety officer has to make sure you're good to go as far as you've been getting good rest and all that. But then it requires a 24-hour shift in a hotel is usually how it works out. So if you're going to go between day 14 and 15, you're supposed to get a 24-hour off. Generally, they put you in a hotel room. But that doesn't always happen. I've been on fires before where a guy comes to me and says, hey, I'm on day 17. When am I supposed to go home? And I say, okay. Well, so what we do now is when you check in, we actually put notations on your T cards and things, so we know when you got there, when you're supposed to leave, so we keep track of you. Because I got a call from a guy, I was off a fire, and I got a call from a guy that was up north, said he was on day like 27. I go, what are you doing out there? He goes, just working. And he didn't realize he wasn't supposed to be there. It was like the incident didn't say anything. He's working. Because then there's another rule about between day 21, you have to have 2 full days off. You have to, there's all these rules, and you get this young hair on fire medic that's just having a good time. They don't realize there's all these rules to protect them. It's for their safety and securities, so you don't go driving home and drive off the edge of a road or something. So the rotation thing, it's not a big deal. It's just making sure we know ahead of time so we can work it out the deal. And like I'll usually be talking to Chief Lynch or something ahead of time to see how you guys want to do it. I'll talk to the incident. Like I said, sometimes you just change out people just because you change out people. But we have to get the home agency included, the dispatch centers involved because they have to do some stuff in Ross with the rotation that the vehicles use. There's some things behind the scenes that take place. So it's really important for the strike team leader. We're going to be talking to you about it ahead of time. About day 4 that you're on the incident, we're going to start thinking about, okay, do we need to do rotations or not? And so we'll start getting ahead of that. We have a form, 213 rotation form we'll give you to fill out. It's a 1 page, it used to be a 1 page, 1 form per engine. We've changed the form, now it's 1 form per strike team. So it's a lot easier to work with. And it helps the dispatch center so they're not losing paperwork. like I said, we'll be there to help you. We like to, at least a 48-hour, 36. It's real problematic when people come in and say, hey, I got a rotation tomorrow morning, and there's no paperwork. The incident hasn't approved, because the IC has to approve it to get paid for it. So you can't just decide we're going to do a rotation at 7 days. It still has to be approved. And we try to make it to where you're on your shift off. So it usually works out, but if it doesn't, you may end up one extra day. We try to do it, if you're on a 24 on, 24 off CAL FIRE, we'll try to do it in your 24 off. If it's a forest service and you're doing 12 on, 12 off, we'll try to do is bring in your rotation crew the night before and then have them spend the night and then rotate that morning so they can go on the line and you can get out of the incident. And then that's the form we're using right now is the rotation form. It's one form per strike team. We have them. I don't think it's available on our website yet, but when you think about it, what we can do is if you're out there, strike team leaders, we can give you a couple of these forms. You can put them in your strike team kit. And then we just talked about here, all this is that the incident dispatch center and the home agency dispatch center have to do some work in Ross. All they have to do is they have to put the vehicles you use to get the people back and forth. Those get paid for, and then the people from home to the incident, and then from the incident back home, that gets covered. So there's some notations and some stuff that needs to be put into Ross so that you can get paid reimbursement for that. We do a separate 42 for the rotation. So the strike team leader and the captains that are on the going home rotation will fill this form out, and you'll take this home with you. It's easier if you take it home, because if you leave it with the captain on that engine, it may get lost. And then I get a phone call saying, hey, can I get a copy of that 42? So it's easier to take that home with you. You can make a copy, give it to your finance people ahead of time. Spent a lot of time on rotations there. I'm just going to go, okay, rental cars, that's another one we love. Okay, so you guys have contracts with rental cars, right? Burbank, Pasadena, Glendale, Arcadia. Do you guys have overhead guys that go out use rental cars?
We try to avoid rental cars.
I think that's a good policy.
We do our best to avoid it.
Yeah, so but if you do though, if you guys have the enterprise contract, there's a lady named Lisa Holmes. She's located up in Redding, but she has the enterprise contract for fire agencies. She's got the whole state. So she sets up the contract. It works out real well for getting a rental car if you need one. But I agree with you. Used to be a great deal because the feds used to have their contract. You get assigned to an incident, and you just make a phone call, go pick up a rental car, use it, drop it off, come home. Feds paid for it, never had to worry about it. Unfortunately, over a number of years, some of the people would get the rental car and they would beat it up, they would thrash it, they would damage it, they'd drop it off at the enterprise and say, see you next fire, and then the bill for the damages would go to the federal government, and the federal government got tired of covering the cost of the damage. So they pushed us into getting local government their own contracts. It's in Exhibit H, talks about rental cars. And it's, like I said, enterprise is a contract. Use your department credit card if you have one issued to you. We don't touch the rental car stuff, OES. We don't touch any of that between the rental car and you. And the invoicing, all that's all taken care of ahead of time. The rental car is put into Ross, covered by the incident. The key there is on your Ross order, it has to say the rental car is authorized. So if you're an overhead going out and you need a rental car, look at your order. If it doesn't say rental car authorized, you need to talk to your dispatch center to make sure that's put on your Ross order. Sounds like you have enough extra vehicles, Chief, to cover some of the going out. And then this just talks about getting a rental car. You have to go online. You have your own account for your agency. You make the reservation. You have to give them a copy of your driver's license, and then you can just go pick it up at wherever your local rental car office is. One of the things the federal government will not pay for is insurance. We've had some rental cars, they go to get the rental car, and then the rental car kind of pressures them to buy the insurance on the car. That's not, if your agency is self-insured, then you're covered. You don't need that extra rental car insurance. And the incident won't pay for it. So if you get the rental car and then you add the insurance, you get the GPS, you get the Sirius radio stuff going, you get all the bells and whistles, all the incident pays for is the base rate for the rental per day rate. So any extras are going to go back to your agency to cover. And this, of course, we can all read that, but it just tells you the rates for and the one that pickup truck right here, you get the Ram 1500 4x4, $72 a day is what the rate is that the incident will pay. So that just tells you the rate. When you do your contract with Enterprise, that's all built in. They work with the federal government, make sure the feds are okay with that rate. Damage to the vehicles is on you and your agency. The incident will not pay for it. If you get into an accident, unless it's something where it was caused by the incident specifically, they're not going to cover it. So tire damage, undercarriage damage, gouges and scratches on the sides of the rig, all that stuff's not covered by the incident. So you would still do a comp claims process to see the incident's going to still review it to determine, but they may, more than likely, they're not going to cover that cost. If you don't clean the vehicle, if you don't run it through a car wash, the rental car is going to charge you $150 to clean the car. That's coming to your agency. This is a photo. It's kind of hard to see, but the person, I'm not sure if it was a safety officer, line safety. It looked like they drove with all the windows open all the time because the whole inside of the vehicle was covered in dust and silt throughout the whole vehicle. The back seat, all the trash was just like almost like the guy, the old country guy throwing the beer cans in the back of the truck as he's driving down the road. It's kind of like that. The whole thing was full of trash. Back seat was full of trash. Coffee stains in the carpet, and so it costs a lot of money to get this back. Because the lady told us, Lisa said, "Hey, we rent this to you. You use it for 2 weeks on a fire. You turn it in. We're going to clean it, and tomorrow we're giving it to a family of 4 to go on their vacation." So it's not something where the vehicle is going to sit out of service for any period of time. So they want you to make sure it's clean. If you have damage from off-road use, it's not covered, even though you get a 4x4 for off-road use. Then this is a contract. And this is hard to see, but this vehicle is $9,200 in damage. When the guy turned it back into him, beat it up so bad, it was $9,200. You can see it's kind of hard, but the bumper's all bent, hit something like a boulder or rock. The bumper's bent up here. The mirror on the right side is got duct tape holding it back on. So it looked like he knocked the mirror off. And this is all duct taped on. And then the guy just turned into your Enterprise and said, "Here you go, here's your car back." But that bill was sent to his fire agency for the cost of damage. And this just shows you on the resource order, says here, it's for a radio operator, cell phone, laptop, 4x4 rental approved. So you want to make sure that's in the special needs section. You guys need a break, or are you guys okay? I got about another 20 minutes. You want a break after that, or you guys good? Okay. I mean, if you have to get them used ahead, you have to get up. Okay, work rest guidelines. You're going to go on fires where it's either going to be a 12 on, 12 off, which is generally the customary for the feds, or you're going to go to a 24 on, 24 off, which is customary from CAL FIRE. Remember that the work rest is 2 to 1, so 12 hours of of work equals 6 hours of rest. 24 hours of work is 12 hours of rest. And this comes into play when it's time to demob. So if you're doing a 24 on, 24 off, and you get on a 24 off, and then they want to demob you while you're starting your off period, how much time they have to give you before they can demob you if you're coming off the line after 24 on? 12. So they can't demob you until 7 o'clock at night. Well, that's okay if you're an hour away from the incident, but if you're in Northern California, what's that tell you? They can't touch you really till, because what's the other piece of that that's important? Travel time home, you have to be home by 10 p.m. That's part of the mobilization guidelines. And so that's why we try to get the further away resources, we try to get you demobbed early in the morning, because we have to get you home by 10 p.m. So we try to, when I sit and talk with the IC, or I'm talking with plans, and they're going to demob some resources the next day, we sit down, because I like to get involved in who's getting demobbed, because I can tell them where they're coming from, so we know how long it's going to take. Because all I do is I take 10 p.m., and then I back it down, and I say, okay, well, if we're going to send an Area C strike team home, and we're sitting up in Redding, it's about a 10 to 12 hour drive home. So you got to decide, okay, is that going to be reasonable, or do we need to sleep them somewhere on the way? Can we stop and have them stop in Fresno and spend the night in Fresno, and then from there it's about 5 hours home, 4 or 5 hours home from there? Or is it close enough where it's an 8-hour drive, we can get them home, but they're going to have to stop about 3 times on the way? So I have to try to help the incident figure that out, because sometimes they'll say, okay, we're going to demob that Area C strike team at 1 o'clock. That's the demob start time. How long does it take to get through demob generally? Could take an hour to 2 hours. So by 3 o'clock, 3:30, you're leaving, and we're trying to get you home by 10 p.m., and you're more than 8 hours away, it's not going to work. And so that's part of what we try to figure out. So the work rest guidelines are in place for your safety. I know a lot of times you're real close to home and you're thinking, hey, we'll get off the line at 6 o'clock, we'll be home by 10, it's okay. But no, think about it, you have to have at least 6 hours of downtime. So it's to protect you and your crews. You may feel good and say, I'm good to go, I got a couple Powerades in me, I'm good. But you still have to think about your crews. So those are in place. The other thing is sometimes guys forget they're on the 24-hour shift and they go, well, I need 24 hours off. No, it's only 12. It's not a one-to-one on the rest work. Sleeping accommodation, that can be problematic. Remember that the incident has to provide, the way it's worded in the CFA, it's whenever possible, they have to provide climatically controlled sleeping accommodations. What does that mean to you? It could be a gymnasium, could be a school classroom, it could be tents with air conditioners in them, it could be a big shaded area they put up. It could be a motel room, hotel room. With federal government, you're not going to get that. It could be a sleeping trailer. So they have to provide something for you to get out of the noise, the atmospheric conditions, to get you some sleep. Some people come in and they just think every time they go to a fire they get a hotel room. That's not the case. Even with CAL FIRE, which they have an MOU that says, I think it's the same thing, isn't it, Silvio? It's like whenever possible.
It doesn't say hotel, it says the same verbiage.
Yeah, but it's always kind of like, where's my hotel room? So if the incident cannot provide that, then they have to look at something for you. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to be in a hotel or a motel, but it's possible. Some strike teams, after a few days, they decide they want to go get their own hotel for a night, kind of get the guys out of there, give a good shower, maybe. But that's on you guys. But if you do that, you need to let us know, because remember, you're always on the clock. So if something happens, they need to get a hold of you, You need to provide a contact. So it's not a guarantee. Use the word feasible. Try to see whatever the verb is here. The other thing is don't split up the strike team, because if one engine says, we want to get a hotel, and the other 4 engines go, no, we're good sleeping in sleep trailers. Don't let them get separated, because you know what's going to happen. They'll call out for the immediate need, the homes are on fire, we need your help, and now you can't find that engine. They turned their phones off and went to bed. And so you have to make sure you all stay together. And then this shows you different things. They got the yurts up there with the air conditioners. They show in the interior here. Some guys do the pup tents or whatever. You guys carry tents on your rigs? Or they had one strike team. It was kind of funny. They had one of these trailers, the big tents, those huge yurts, is about almost as big as a room, maybe a little bit smaller. And they put all their pup tents in that tent. So you walked in the tent and you're looking around, there's all these little tents inside the big tent. Yeah, that or they're just creatures of habit. I want my own little space here. Sleeping trailers, not that bad, right? Some guys like them, some guys don't. We had some issues years ago where you get the camp crud because guys are going there hacking and coughing. But now they're required to have the HEP filters and change them out. And after everybody vacates, they're supposed to go through and disinfect the whole inside of it to reduce any chance of someone getting sick. I know some guys don't like them. They feel like they're in a little coffin, or they don't. It just depends on how tired you are, I guess. On the motel, generally it's only going to be CAL FIRE, or if you do it on your own. CAL FIRE does have guidelines. When we're on a CAL FIRE incident, we follow their guidelines. And so it never fails. There's always one strike team that never seems to get the bigger picture. And so they look at it as a vacation, they get the motel, and they may act like a rock star and they trash the hotel, or they decide to go lay by the pool and they're 24 off drinking beer. And you're like, first of all, I don't think the policy allows you to consume alcohol on duty because you're still on the clock. And we had one strike team. It kind of felt bad for the guy. He was a probationary firefighter on a strike team, and he decided, I guess he needed a beer. So he drinks a beer in his room and leaves it empty in the trash can of the room. So that's the first no-no, right? Because the next day they're gone, and the maid service is cleaning the rooms, and what are they going to do? They walk over to the motel manager and say, I found this in this room. They look to see who's in the room, get a hold of the strike team leader. Guy's on probation. They demobbed him, sent him home, and they fired him for drinking on duty, on probation. So the smart guy, the engineer, did what? He put the beer can in somebody else's trash, right? No, that didn't happen. But the one guy did drink in his room, and he's thinking nobody's going to know, but he got in trouble for that. The other thing is you have a form you have to fill out. What's wrong about this form right away? Same person signed all the names. Remember, each person has to sign. What's the other thing you see right now? What color's it got to be in? Blue ink. So you always want to have the old blue ink pen with you. So blue ink, and each person signs for themselves. I know you get with the probationary guy that wants to be helpful. He's going to fill it all out. And you could do that. You could fill out all the names, all that information, but you have to sign for yourself. Time unit, we're your time, and that's where the reimbursement is the 42 form, so we're your time. And so what we like to do is when you check in with the incident, if we're there and we have our support unit, we want you to come check in with us. What we'll do is we'll do a T-card on your strike team or you as an overhead, and we'll keep track of you in our system. We do like you to come by and check in with us. If you're on your way out to go to the fire, hey, we're going to be in Division Z today or whatever. And when you come back in, check in with us so we make sure you're doing okay. We have our cell phone numbers. Everything is available for you guys. If you have any concerns, questions, issues, we're there. We're your agency representative to help you out. So that's our form. And you guys, I gave you all a blank one if you want to hang on to it. If you don't need it, don't want it, just leave it or give it to somebody that will take a second one. Or you can always bring it back and put it on your engine and the clipboard. The key spot that I like to see everybody fill out is this number 1 box right here. I think your battery's going on this thing. That box right there. What's the 3-letter designator for your agency? Okay, so make sure you remember that one. You guys had a real fun time 2 years ago. I was on a fire, and don't copy your neighbor. It was at Glendale Burbank that did that.
It was me.
Was it you?
Pasadena got the money. Right?
Yeah, Pasadena got the money. The guy was the guy copying off your neighbor. And so in the box, I put CAPAS, and it was GLN, and the check went to, even though I think you guys, they said that the check went to Pasadena. And then I got a call from Glendale wanting to know where the money was. I said, well, when I pulled the form up, I go, well, it went to Pasadena. So I guess you guys had to work it out between you. Because our people up in Sacramento, they're reimbursing based on the 3-letter designator. And so they just assume that Glendale is a benevolent group of guys. So that's the key thing is that. Then make sure down here, this is where we sign it. We sign it. The Fed or CAL FIRE signs it. And then you make sure you fill out this area here. Leave a contact phone that's for you. Because our staff will be up in headquarters. They'll be looking at the form. If they have a question, they'll call you directly to talk to you. If they can't get a hold of you, they'll call. If it's my fire, they'll call me. And I keep a green copy of all of these. There's 4 copies here. The white copy goes to our headquarters. The pink stays to the finance people. You keep the goldenrod, and then the green stays with me. And I didn't know when I took this job that I keep every fire that's my fire. I keep a box of all the 213s, comp claims, 42s. And so my garage is getting filled with boxes of old fires. And I've got to figure out a better way to do that because I have all the IAPs, all the maps, and so it's starting to look pretty bad in the garage. I told the wife, maybe I need a storage locker, and she's like, do you want to pay for that? I said, well, write it off on the taxes, right? And that's what a filled out one looks like. The red is what we fill out, and the blue is what you fill out. This in the box here, you notice how the blue is filled out. That's when you got dispatched, date and time. The red, what we do is when you go to leave, everything's filled out, everything's signed, and then we're going to sit with you and say, okay, what's your ETA home? And then you got to figure out what's going to take from here to get to home. Remember, it's from here, the fire, to your home agency. It's not to your house. Because some guys will say, well, I got to drop my rental car off, then I got to go to the station, then I got to go by Station 3 and say hi to the guys, and then I'll get home. And so, no, it's from when you leave till you get to home agency. Yeah, that doesn't work, yeah. Everybody, I had one, the same thing, a guy put like 9 hours to get home. I was like, 9 hours? It says here 4. Wow, we got to go by the one down. I go, you're not going to the Golden Gate Bridge. I know it's always fun. Remember though that if you do the bridge tour, which guys do, it's like, hey, if you can fit that in and get home when you're supposed to, that's fine. But remember, there's a toll to go over the bridge, and Big Red doesn't get exempted. You still got to pay the toll. So be prepared, because guys will blow right on through and the tick, picture, and then you'll get a letter in the mail for the toll for the Golden Gate Bridge, Oakland Alameda Bridge. If you're on the toll, like Orange County, was it the 110 down south has the express lanes. If you're in the express lanes and you don't have the transponder, you're paying the bill. They don't exempt emergency vehicles. So you have to have the transponder or stay out of those lanes or wait till you get the bill, and then you might be able to argue saying, hey, emergency, we're on the way to a fire. How many went to the canyon fires in Orange County this last summer? Will you guys get up on those, the 241 and all that stuff?
Yeah, I had to call several times to get it cleared up.
We tried to do, what we did at the beginning of the fire is we tried to get every license plate for every vehicle. It was a lot of work, but everybody's license plate, and then what we did is we gave a license plate packet to the express people so that they go back through the records and just basically exempt everybody. Some people didn't, for some reason, didn't give us a license, didn't make it to the sheet, so you got some people did get bills in the mail. My agency, they sent me a transponder about 6 months ago, so I got stuck in my, I think I used it on that. I don't use it very much. I still feel kind of uncomfortable going to those lanes. I have one, a personal one, and I hardly ever use it. I'm kind of cheap, I guess. Even though it's state money, I should start spending that, I guess. Comp claims, that's another issue that this is a form we'll give you. It's basically a CAL FIRE form, kind of modified a little bit. It gives you a guideline on how to go through. You get damage to your rig, department property. It gives you the format and gives you some process. And so if you have a problem on the line, something happens, the first thing you got to do is notify your division or group supervisor. Hey, if you're an engine captain, you notify your strike team leader or your task force leader. But then you got to because once you leave the line, if you have a problem on the line and you take pictures of it, you get the division supervisor to fill out a 213 saying that places you at the scene. Because when the comp claim starts trying to figure out if this is a valid claim, one of the things they need to do is know, well, where were you at when this happened? Well, I was in Division A. Well, how do we know you were in Division A? Well, the division supervisor provided this 213 saying, yeah, you were on my division, this happened while you're on my division. They're not going to use that to say whether it's valid or not, but it just gives you credibility that you were there. Then you have photos. You have to fill out a traffic vehicle accident report. There's a 213 that gets filled out by ground support. You take over to ground support, they're going to look at the rig because you have to think of it for your own agency here. If you're driving down the street and you hit a parked car, what's your process? Do you just drive away? Yeah? Okay. No, you have all your think of it the same way on a fire. If you're driving down a motorway or down a dirt road and you clip a tree, clip a boulder, vehicle's parked and you hit a mirror, it's the same process. Pictures, notifications, you have to fill out forms. There's all this process. If you're not sure what to do, come find us. We have this process here we'll help you with, and then we'll also, because you're busy, we'll help put your package together for comp claims. If you walk over to comp claims and say, hey, I got a broken toy, I need you to pay for it, they're going to say, well, did you talk to your OES rep? Well, no. Well, go back to them and start there, because we usually go ahead of time to the comp claims person and we'll sit with them and say, okay, how do you want to handle damage to equipment? How do you want to handle damage to engines? All that stuff. We usually ask them how you want to handle that. If it's an OES engine, we definitely need to have all that stuff because all that has to be taken care of. I have to put a package together within 48 hours, and that goes to up to our fleet because that has to be turned into the state that we had an accident with one of our vehicles. So I definitely get involved with an OES vehicle. And this just talks about getting witness statements, getting division supervisor, whoever to say, yeah, that happened to you, photos of everything. Ground support's going to say, yeah, that looks like it wasn't negligence. It looked like it was the righteous damage on the incident. But remember, nothing's guaranteed. So if you're driving and you see like an overhead obstruction, looks a little low, and you run into it, that's on you. That's negligence. The incident's not going to cover that because you're going to say, well, why didn't you mitigate the hazard? But if you're driving on this same road, you have the same overhead obstruction like a branch, and on the other side, a home's on fire, people are trapped in the building, and you don't have the time to mitigate it because you're trying to save some lives, that changes the whole scenario because you cause damage to save a life. Now, if you cause damage and you're on mop-up overhaul, that makes it back to, well, why don't you stop, mitigate the hazard, do something else. So it's what you're doing at the time of the damage. And that's just a state vehicle accident report. And you want to get that thing filled out. Try to get the stuff ahead of time filled out, because it's hard to remember later, especially if you're there for 2 weeks. Sometimes you forget what you had for breakfast yesterday. Same thing happens here. After a while, you lose the newness of something. And one of the things this picture just illustrates is you want, in your photos you take, you have to have a photo showing the license plate of your vehicle, showing the VIN number of your vehicle, showing who you are, and then the damage. It shows it got pitted. There's all kinds of rocks pitted a windshield. But that's what you need to show. And so we'll try to put together a picture tells a story kind of thing to help illustrate it. And then this is just, you go and get the repairs done. It's a work order for the repair. What needs to be done. You go to ground support, they're going to look at the vehicle, make sure it's roadworthy, and then they're going to say what needs to be repaired, estimated cost. The problem I have with the ground support sometimes, we had on the Canyon fire from 2016 in Vandenberg, we had 5 engines that got scorched paint from the fire made a run and it shifted based on a wind shift, and it scorched a bunch of sides of rigs. And the ground support estimated the cost of the paint. And it was really low, because once you get the rig back and you got to take the decals off, you got to prep and paint, put new decals on, it was a lot more money than what the estimate from ground support was. So that's one of the things we have to really, if you're able to call home, talk to your shop or the people that know that and say, hey, what's it going to cost? You at least get your side of it to say, well, I talked to our paint guy back at our department. He said that's about $2,000 to fix the paint. And the ground support guy is saying $500. I'm thinking, there are no Earl Shives anymore for that kind of stuff. You can't get that $500 that's what it was, like $500 to repaint 2 compartments and a bunch of stencil stuff. And the S number, we talked about that already. It's a bunch of comp claim stuff. Okay, so if you do get an accident or damage, remember the safety officer has to be included. We get included. Talk to comp claims. Don't forget your home agency. I know that's calling Dad to tell Dad something went wrong, and then we'll make sure we'll ask you questions. Did you remember this? Remember that? Demob, when they demob you, they set a certain time. And so, for example, you see here 0800, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 1:30. If you're 1201, XLC 1201 at 1:30, don't show up at 9 o'clock thinking, hey, maybe we'll sneak in and we'll go to demob. They're going to get the sheet out and say, okay, what's your 1:30? We'll see you at 1:30. Now, if we can work a deal out, if we're trying to get rid of resources because it's like Christmas Eve and we're trying to get rid of everybody, we might work a deal out where we get you over to ground support before your time. So when you get to demob, you get your demob sheet, you got your ground support sheet with you, you can get that knocked out. But if your demob is set for 1:30, that's what time they want you to show up, because they're impacted. Ground support's impacted. The demob people are impacted. They don't want you to come ahead of that. We may be able to negotiate depending on what's going on. Maybe you got something else going on at home, and we can work a deal out to get you, maybe we can swap you out with somebody else. But we'd like you to stay with the time. Remember that if you have a trainee, you want to make sure that you go to training specialist, get that person checked in, and you still have to finish that part of it too. So what I try to tell people is if you can get to the training specialist maybe the night before you know you're going to be demobbed, get all that paperwork done, or you have 1:30 demob in the morning, you're over training specialist, try to do that. Anybody experience that where you went to training specialist, there's a line out the door? People, the way the last minute, now they got this big line of people, and it holds up getting demobbed off the incident. So you want to plan for that, and maybe the night before go in. Because if you're not going to go on the line the next day, there's no reason for you to wait till tomorrow. Finish your paperwork, go to training specialist, try to get that done ahead of time. I firmly believe that everybody on the incident should have a evaluation. So as a fire captain, you should do a 225 on your firefighters and your engineer. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you should evaluate their performance. Strike team leaders, even though your captains are not trainees, as an engine boss, you should still give them an evaluation. And then the strike team leader should get an evaluation from the div supervisor. That one's a harder one because they don't. You may go different places during an incident, but I think it's really important to provide that because it gives you a chance to have some closure with your guys. Maybe you don't work with those individuals all the time. When I was a strike team leader, what I would generally do is have a captain's meeting the night before we were demobbing, and part of what I would do is we'd have like a F-42 party. We'd all sit down and fill this out together, make sure Glendale didn't put Pasadena, all that stuff. But we'd fill these out ahead of time, except for the go-home date and time. And that way when we started demob, we were prepared. Plus it gives me a chance as a strike leader to see how everything went. Because I have a different view of how things went. And so being able to talk to the captains and have a good captain's meeting. Plus, what I like to do too is I got embarrassed once, more than once, but once that I can remember or that I want to remember, is when you go to leave, what's one of the places you can potentially get hung up at? What are you turning in that you may get hung up? Supply. And generally speaking, the only person that's supposed to be able to sign for supply is the strike team leader, but you'd be surprised. And so I recall sitting in line at supply, a couple behind an LA City strike team, and they were trying to get their little signature, and the guy in supply said, well, let's see, and he pulls out a card, and there was all these things that the strike team from LA City had checked out that hadn't been checked back in yet. And he said, well, I need you to turn this all in, and the strike team leader was going, I didn't check this out. He goes, well, this is what your strike team has. So, and I'm like looking at my assistant strike team leader laughing, thinking, those city guys. And then I started thinking, my guys wouldn't do that, would they? And I said, let's get out of line. And so we stepped out of line, walked over to supply, and went and said, hey, and we had a bunch of stuff. I'm like, oh. So I had to go back to the strike. Hey guys, come on, green pants, really? So we had to make sure, because that's where you'll get embarrassed. Guys will check stuff out, and it's not like lovely parting gifts. They want that stuff back generally. The other thing is, you have old chaps that need to be replaced. Don't check in and right away walk over to supply with chaps and say, hey, here, and they'll say, did you just check in? Oh yeah, well, we're not going to exchange old chaps. So what I would suggest is, work a few shifts, use the chaps, then go and exchange. They'll do that, but not when you walk in right away. And don't think you can check out firing materials. That's usually not a good practice either. That's got to be approved by the ops. Or try to order more shot for your firing material. That doesn't work either. We're the A-rep for you guys. So that's what we're there for, to help you out. And then for those that have OES engines, the only difference is you have to do an inventory when you go to leave. It's a state inventory on the rig. And then you have a Voyager fuel card to use. Not during the incident. We're same guidelines. We don't want you using our card for fuel. You should be getting fuel at the incident. And then this just talks about what to expect. Talks about getting information. Make sure, this is a sign we saw at one of the check-ins. It said, be ready to show your qual card. So think about it. Do you have your qual card from your agency with you? Make sure you have it with you. I have mine in my pocket of my shirt. If you don't, what's another thing that's accepted? You guys all have your phones? Take a picture of your qual card on your phone, have it in your phone, and then if you show up and they want to see your qual card and you're thinking, ooh, you can pull your phone out, here's my qual card. They'll accept that if you have a photo of your qual card. But you should have it with you. I don't know, you guys, is it like a big, long, small card? It's part of the ID? But it should be, it's updated every year, I think, on that. The CFA does pre-qualify a trainee, so please try to bring a trainee. If you don't have anybody in your system that's available to go as a trainee, consider going to the other op areas because they may have trainees that they can move in with you. We did that last year. Area G, which is the South Bay, Torrance, all that, they didn't have any qualified strike team leaders that could go out. And so what they did, they borrowed a qualified LA County strike team leader, and that individual went with a trainee from the South Bay and was able to get that person qualified. So we don't want you to be stifled by that, and we want you to get a trainee as much as possible because it's pre-qualified in the system. Make sure you call your home agency, call mom, make sure mom knows where you're at. And then this just talks about response modes. You guys all know that. One of the things that, if you're an immediate needs strike team, they expect you to be out the door and gone in less than 30 minutes. So you should have your stuff ready to go. It's not, hey guys, we're jumping the shower real quick, and you should be, everybody knows, you guys come into work in the morning, you ever notice the weather? It just feels like a strike team day, doesn't it? Sometimes the weather feels that way. And so if you're a do you guys have that right? Everybody's pre-designated. You know who's in the rotation. You know your engine's up. You should have your red bag or whatever your out-of-county bag ready to go, and all your gear ready to go. Make sure the ice chest is refilled, and then so you can get out the door because you want to. To me, it helps the reputation of your strike team. If your guys are ready to go, always prepared, you're engaged, then you're going to have a better reputation. If you look like you're not really prepared, you guys look like a soup sandwich out there, it's good. Everybody's going to know. And then for strike team leaders, even overhead, make sure you have a file. I have a little file box with all the stuff I need in it that I carry with me. And then this last two slides, we have, last year we split all of our regions into north and south. So we had 6 region chiefs. Now we have 12. So Mark Corson's from the feds. We just hired him. He starts May 1st, so I don't have a phone number for him yet. But John Salvate, he was a Region 2 chief. He transferred to Region 1 North. So he has Santa Barbara, Ventura, San Luis Obispo County. I have Orange and LA County, but we're partners, so we kind of share the responsibilities. Up until November of last year, I had the whole region. And then the second page is the second half is the region 4, 5, and 6. And like I said, Randy Unkovich came from the feds, and he starts May 1st also. But phone numbers, put them in your phone. My number, if you get questions, concerns, you're on a strike team, overhead, you're out of state, you can't figure out where Kansas is or whatever, I don't mind a phone call. Text messages, I like text. I tell people I have daughters, so they don't answer my phone call, but they'll answer my text message. And then if you want, this is a QR code that'll get you all the job aids, forms, samples, and agreements. So if you want to take a photo of that on your QR reader. That'll get you, it'll take you to a page that has all kinds of information on it. And I'll back that up, and then that's my information, my phone, and the bottom number, that 845 number, that is the fire duty officer. So we rotate the duty. So any 24/7, if you're on a strike team, you can't get a hold of me, you can call the duty guy. Yes?
Your other slide had your phone number is 27. Is it 27 or 37?
Where you,
Go back. 37.
oh, they screwed that up. It's 3.
Right there.
That's 37.
Okay.
I got to change that. I changed that and told them to change it. No, it's 3837. I don't know who that is. That could be the governor's phone number for all I know. Yeah. What's that? Back or forward?
The other step you have.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so like I said, you can get a hold of me. You can talk to Chief Ritchie or Chief Lynch. But like I said, the bottom phone number, that's a good number. That's statewide. If you're anywhere and you want to get a hold of an OES, and you just call that number and say, hey, I'm looking for Chief Stone, and they'll give you my phone number.